Okay, yeah, it is recording. All right. Okay, well, welcome everyone to the final session. This is session 4. Now, it was officially titled A Well-Oiled Mechanism, but after having had some time to think about it, I really decided that a better name for this was Having Your Bags Packed. And this is our first quick lesson for the day because this shows you that it is never too late to change. So if there's something in your course that doesn't make sense to you, go ahead and change it. The key here is that you really want to explain what the change was to your students and, if relevant, why the change was made. Now, obviously, if it's a typo or something very minor, that doesn't matter. But anytime a student goes in and sees that something's changed and they don't know why, it tends to give them a little bit of a sense of being disconcerted. So it's just something to consider anytime you make changes to a live course. What do students know? What have students already seen? And based on that, what should you tell them? And if necessary, what should you explain about that situation? Now, as before, just a reminder, there is a companion course and a personal course for this session. Again, the companion course is online course development training, and the personal course should be course development training with your last name. Both of these are under the No Term tab. And at this point, or very shortly, the latest version of our online template should be up in your personal course. So now the outcomes that we'll be looking at in today's session are the last two, which is really the steps towards opening a course in Brightspace and some of the things to consider as you operate your course in Brightspace. Now, this has been true for all of the lectures so far, but really, we're going to be talking about some of the theory and some of the things to be thinking about while doing these tasks, but we simply don't have time to get into the technical aspects of these tasks. So for the most part, we aren't going to be looking at how to do any of these things. So like we aren't going to be going through how to open your course. We'll be looking at the things to think about. And that's really where the companion course comes in for this particular session more than any of the others, is all of the technical information on how to do these things will be linked from there. So at this point, we've really gone through our backwards design model. And what we're looking at now is how do I take sort of this idea of how do I develop my course, to how do I actually turn it into what we refer to as a production course, so a course that is ready to run. So first of all, we're going to return to our syllabus. By this point in your development phase, you would ideally have your syllabus basically completed. And within Brightspace for asynchronous online courses, we have the syllabus sort of duplicated in that we have every portion of the syllabus broken out in what we call the course information, but we also have you upload a copy of the course syllabus. Now, the idea behind having the broken out information sections in course information is that this really supports chunking, and it makes it useful for students to quickly locate specific information. Or you can even direct students to specific information using internal linking. Just as an aside, the two most commonly used areas we see from the student side are how you will be evaluated, which includes information on how scores are and final grades are calculated, and the course schedule, which really isn't surprising. Now, the reason that we also have you upload a copy of the syllabus is that this really comes down to an accessibility or equitability issue. This format can make it much easier for students to print out all the information. And there's any number of reasons why students may want to do this. But one is just including that students may simply not have easy or reliable access to high-speed internet. So having a printed copy is simply easier. So one thing that's in addition to the standard syllabus is that we do provide professional instructional videos, professional instructor videos. These are done in-house by Jason High, and these are usually done for the course introduction and the course videos. So these are not instructional videos, these are introductory videos to the course and are a great way for establishing an initial instructor presence in an asynchronous course. If you have any interest in doing some of these videos, just drop us a line at help@oswego.edu and we will get the process started. I will also post some examples of some of the instructional videos that have been done in the past, instructor videos that have been done in the past, so you can get an idea of what these look like. You can very much tell my brain is wired in a specific way because I keep saying instructional. So now I want to move on to thinking about what your course structure actually looks like in Brightspace. So at SUNY Oswego, our online courses are typically organized into modules, which functionally act as folders in the content area of Brightspace. For convenience, these modules usually match up with some regular schedule, for example, one module every week. But the modules also try to be centralized around one or more learning outcomes, with all of the materials supporting that learning module being included within that specific content folder. This means ideally that all informational materials, assignments, discussions, quizzes, etc., should be accessible directly from the relevant module. Now, there are some exceptions to this. Like if you've got a long running project, it may make sense to put material for that into a different standalone module. But even in that case, you can use internal course links to remind students where to go from this particular week's module, as an example. Now, Brightspace allows you to create a generalized I'm going to try to show this. So Brightspace allows you to create general modules, which always appear on the left of the Brightspace interface. However, when you go into one of these general modules, you have an additional option at the very bottom to create a sub-module. And you can see this is the companion course that I've got several sub-modules, so you can add descriptions to the sub-modules and put additional information in them. Now, where things can become a bit complicated is you can put sub-modules in sub-modules in sub-modules. And what you start seeing is that the system starts acting differently. So for example, this is a standard submodule that then has two more submodules. And you see, I no longer have the descriptions showing up on there that normally would. And if I were to add even another layer of submodules, I'd stop seeing the indents on the side. Everything would be lined up at the same level. So just be aware that you really don't want to go beyond two subfolder levels, like two submodule levels. You generally want your main module, a submodule, and if you really need to, one more submodule inside that. But you really don't want to go any further than that because students start getting lost and the interface just doesn't look familiar. Now, one thing I do want to call out is I organized the companion course in this way because it makes it easy for you to sort of search what you want to see. So I can very easily look at the folders and then go into a folder and look for specific resources. However, that may not be the way that a student navigates the course. What students often do is use these navigation buttons. So they can go through an item and simply click onto the next item. Now, the only issue with this is that when I hit a folder, it sort of kicks me out of this system. So depending on exactly how you are presenting information, especially if it's in a very linear format, you may find it easier to avoid using subfolders at all and simply have a list of everything in the course. It'll look like a tremendous amount of information to you, but again, from the student view, they may simply be using these next buttons to navigate through the entire thing. And by not using subfolders, you get an uninterrupted experience. So just something to consider as you're thinking about how you want to structure your entire course. So now let's talk about actually putting our content into Brightspace. So you'll notice that this is kind of reversed from how we developed this, in that we're not starting by building our assessments or anything like that. We're starting by putting in our content. There are some other ways to do it, but I've found that usually when I'm actually to the point of building a course, that it's easier to think of it of putting in the content than putting in the assessments. But your individual mileage may vary. So the first way of adding content into Brightspace is simply uploading files. This is probably the easiest option, and the best part about it is that it preserves all the formatting. At least if you're using it as a text document. There's other cases where if you want to upload a PowerPoint presentation or a spreadsheet as a reference or something like that, this is really your only option. The biggest drawback to using a file upload is probably that you can't make any changes without uploading a new file. And it's also very easy for students to download that file to their local computer. There's no real way to avoid that. That's how the system is designed to work. And students having a local copy of a file may be of concern to some faculty. The next idea is simply creating a link to some resource. Now, this obviously takes you directly to an external resource and whatever functionality is located there. But it does remove the student from the Brightspace environment. So that means to get back in Brightspace, they'll have to close out of whatever interface they're in, so it can be disruptive to a contiguous experience. Either way, it's usually best to use the option to create a new window, which actually creates a new tabs, but still called new window. And the only other thing to remember is that if you're pointing students to an external tool, you are still responsible for the accessibility of that tool. So you may need to have alternate options available for key materials, depending on circumstances. Now, as we know, accessibility is its own gigantic thing. If you have more questions about accessibility, there are resources, and a great one is the Accessibility Work Group and the Accessibility Fellows. So if you are looking at a website and you simply don't know whether it's accessible or how to handle it, if it's obviously not accessible, that's who you would go to ask questions. Next, we have the idea of creating content in Brightspace. Now, the specific command for this is creating a file, and in parentheses, it'll say web page. We often just shorten this to saying creating a page in Brightspace. This is usually the most time-intensive way of creating content, but it by default makes the material the most accessible, including in mobile environments. Now, for me personally, what I usually do is I start by creating the materials in a word processor. I find it much easier to move the materials around, to work out chunking, and generally to play with the big picture. And from there, I just copy and paste it into the individual pages as is appropriate. The thing to be aware if you want to do that is that formatting oftentimes doesn't translate perfectly. So you'll probably have to do some touch up in the Brightspace text editor after copying and pasting. On the bright side, once you've got the material into Brightspace, you can build in a lot of interactivity, especially if you're using the Creator Plus toolkit. Now, last, what about using videos? Well, the first holy rule of using videos is do not upload videos to Brightspace. We actually do have a limit on the amount of space that we have in Brightspace, and videos eat that up very quickly. They can also cause system lags. Basically, we have better ways of putting our videos into Brightspace. Now, if you were to look on the create options in Brightspace, you will see something called video or audio. If you use this, you can paste in a link from a place like YouTube, and it should automatically pick that up and play it within the Brightspace environment. Alternatively, you can also embed videos directly into Brightspace pages. So that builds on that idea I was talking about of interactivity within a page, because you can have text, then a video, then more text. And actually, this becomes very flexible because anywhere you have the Brightspace full text editor, which includes discussions, quizzes, assignments, you can actually embed videos into those. So I could post a video and then tell people to have a discussion about that all in the same place. Now for your personal videos, so this is the option, instead of uploading something, uploading something to Brightspace, I can upload it to Panopto. And this is our video server. This is run by Dan Laird, so if you do have any questions about it, he's the guy to go to, though, again, you would do it through help@oswego.edu. Panopto videos are a little different because instead of putting them in Brightspace through the Create tab, they're actually done through the existing activities, then the external learning tools. And I don't expect you to remember that, but I'm telling you that in the hopes that you'll just remember, oh, Panopto videos are a little different. But basically, any sort of video can be uploaded or even recorded directly into Panopto and then linked out from there. So as our next building block, let's go ahead and add our assessments. Now, the thing with assessments in Brightspace is that, at least personally, I find it easiest to create them in the course tools, especially when I'm going with that backwards design concept, because that allows me to create them as standalone items. And so you see, if you go into course tools, you've got the options to create assignments, discussions, quizzes, etc. But when I'm ready to put them in content, that means it's really easy for me to simply go into existing activities, click on what I want to add, in this case, an assignment, and click on the assignment that I want to add. I'm also going to point out that there's a naming convention that I use. In a normal class, it would be M1A1 for Module 1, Assignment 1. In this case, it's Session 1, Assignment 1. But this comes into play when I'm building my course like this because it makes it really easy for me to see which assignment goes where. Jumping ahead a little bit, this also ties into setting up the gradebook because it makes it really obvious which gradebook entry is tied to which assignment. And when I click an assignment, it simply adds it to the bottom of that module. And I can use the drag and drop options to put it wherever I want. Easy peasy. Now, quizzes work in exactly the same way. Discussions are slightly different, though. So with discussions, we have what are called forums and topics. The forum is just a bucket which holds multiple discussion topics. And in most cases, you are going to link directly to a topic. So I just click on the forum, and then I click on the assignment or the topic in the forum, and it will create a direct link to that topic. However, if I have more than one discussion in a module, I may actually want to link to the forum. And I do that by hitting the plus sign. And the reason for this is that, sorry, I'm in the wrong module. Let me get that into one. Is that now when I click on that discussion, instead of having to screw around with multiple links, all of my discussions and their prompts are displayed on their own page. So it can make it very easy for students to see all of the discussions that are in one particular module. But again, I would only really consider using this if you are using multiple discussions in each module. What are you doing? So again, really what you want to ask is just how many discussions are in a module, and based on that, does it make more sense to link to a discussion forum or directly to the topic? The gradebook. So you've got all of your content and all of your assessments in your course, but now you need to set up how all of this turns into a grade for your students. The gradebook is a fairly complicated system. And literally I do 40-minute sessions on just setting up your gradebook, and it still just scratches the surface. So again, there are resources in the companion course, but what I'd like to do here is instead think about questions that should be answered before you ever go near the gradebook. Most of this information should be in your syllabus anyways, but having this on hand will make actually building your gradebook so much easier. So the first thing is simply, is your course points-based or percentage-based? And obviously I made a typo there and I will fix that later. If it is a percent-based system, basically the points don't matter. All of the quizzes add up to 30%, all of the discussions are 20%, and the final paper is 50%. Everything adds up to 100%, and the distribution is simply based on those percentages. Points, on the other hand, the points are all that matters. Whatever the points add up to, that becomes the denominator. Whatever students add is the numerator. divide them, you get the student's final grade. Well, divide them and multiply it by 100. Next, are there categories that you can group your assignments, sorry, that should have been assessments, into to help students better understand the effect on their grade? Now, in a points-based system, you do not need to use categories. But what they can do is, if you're grouping like all of your mastery quizzes into one, and then you have a different category for your high stakes exams, it can help students better understand what their scores actually mean, because they may think, well, I've been doing amazing on all of these mastery quizzes. Oh, but they're only worth this tiny percent of my grade. So I really do need to get a good grade on the high stakes exam as well. Now I'm talking about what are assignments worth. This is really a category question, because if you're using percent-based categories, you can have assignments be worth different amounts in that category. The math behind it starts getting a bit tricky, but it's something to be aware of, because maybe I want all of my quizzes in the same category, but the first quiz is only worth half as much because it's sort of getting them introduced to the ideas. Do I need any manual columns? Basically, is there anything from outside of Brightspace that I need to calculate into my grade? If it's in Brightspace, technically it should be attached to some assessment, and you shouldn't need to worry about this. The exception to this is if you are using assignments in a publisher's system and you're trying to link that to Brightspace. In that case, forget all about this. You need to talk to the publisher who will help you integrate their system with Brightspace. Do I want to drop any grades? And the other question here is, do I want to tell my students I'm dropping any grades? Sometimes we like to be nice, but we don't want students to expect things to count their eggs before they're hatched. Do I want to use a unique schema? Schemas in this case are what we use to say something like a 90% is equal to an A minus. Usually this is a case where you can use this to sort of build in a curve by right from the outside saying, okay, if you get an 88, that's an A minus. But we can build pretty much whatever you want. Do I want to have points, bonus points or extra credit? And do I want to curve the final grade? This one, you don't really need to decide until the end, but it can be nice to have just an idea of where you want to go. Now, again, all of this you really want to have figured out before you ever touch the grade book, and definitely before the course starts. It is massively easier to fix any gradebook issues before there are student grades in them. And again, the gradebook is a very complicated system, so I very much encourage you to talk to an ID, drop a line to help@oswego.edu and say, I need help with my gradebook. And we will happily help you now, much more happily than when the course has started running. Really quickly, what are due dates? These are simply dates that can be attached to any sort of assessment, which simply send a reminder out to students telling them that something is due at a specific time. These should not be confused with access dates. Access dates control when a student can see different things. These just give students a reminder that something is due. And if a student turns it in after the due date, it will be marked late. But it does not have any other effect. Still, this particular tool is one of the best things you can have by your side when you are reviewing a course. And it's accessed by going to course admin and manage dates.
Douglas?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I don't believe you shared your screen.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
And I tried to share and I can't.
Yeah, somehow the screen sharing got turned off. Wow, wonder how long that's been going on.
Most of the presentation, but I thought I could fix it. I apologize.
Oh my, oh, I apologize about that. I am very sorry. So, this is the, manage dates tool. It will show you literally everything in the course. What its start dates are, what its end dates are, and what its due dates are. And the only thing that you cannot change here for some odd reason are the due dates on discussions. It is possible to put a due date on a discussion, just not here. The main thing I would point out is there's this filter at the top. And I use this extensively. For one thing, just based on my thinking, it's easier to consider all of the assignments and their dates rather than trying to look at the whole course altogether. And the other thing is you will get overwhelmed when you have a full course and you're trying to look at everything. The only thing I use the all for is to, after I'm completed course, is scrolling through and looking for anything that looks wrong, like a date in the wrong year or something like that. Okay, so back on button. So moving on, two things that you also need to think about when your course is coming up is, do I want a course merger and do I want a TA? And both of these can be added using the service catalog at oswego.edu/CTS. You'll see a big button that looks like this. Click this and search for the option that you want. The only thing to really know here is that if a course is cross-listed in the course catalog, you don't usually need to do a course merge. The one exception is that if the cross-list wasn't requested prior to the creation of the course shells in Brightspace. So basically, if you don't see a merge that you want once the courses have been created, go ahead and request one. The other thing to note is we cannot do course merges after a course has started. Once there's student work in there, we cannot merge it. Importing content, again, the actual ways to do this are going to be in the companion website, but you may want to do this if you've been working in a development shell and you want to move that work into the production shell. You can use it if you've got an existing course and you want to use it as the basis for a new course. And maybe more interestingly, in the second case, you can grab specific materials and copy them over. You do not need to bring over the entire thing. And of course, you'll want to do this after you've finished developing the course and offered it once and are ready to offer it a second time. Office hours. Now, if you have face-to-face office hours on campus, there is no problem with an online student dropping in for face-to-face office hours. But you cannot count on your students being on campus, so you do need to have some version of virtual office hours. Most commonly, this is done by Zoom office hours. However, depending on the course and the faculty member, you may find that these are not well attended. So you may want to go to something where they send you an email and you schedule a Zoom session with that particular student, in which case that would be on-demand office hours. The other thing is that Zoom can be integrated into Brightspace, but when you do that, each class has its own link. So if you want to have sort of general office hours for multiple classes, you're going to want instead to generate a Zoom link and just use the link function to add it in. Don't use the integrated Zoom. Even if you do go to the on-demand idea, though, I would still highly encourage you to hold office hours before any high-stakes assessment. one, it just makes you accessible, but two, it encourages students to remember that, oh yeah, this is a high stakes assessment. Maybe I should be worrying about this Friday night instead of Sunday night when it's due Monday. I also want to mention the Oscar rubric. This is a tool that we as instructional designers use when we are evaluating courses. And the link that I put up there is to the SUNY Oscar rubric, which goes into incredible detail on the tool and will tell you anything you ever wanted to know about it. But we do have a customized abbreviated version for the campus, and the link for that is in the companion course. Basically, this is a tool that you can use for yourself to evaluate your course. Or since it's a rubric, you can also look at it ahead of time because it'll give you ideas on a bunch of things to consider when you're designing your course. So now you're on your first day, you're ready to open your course. In most cases, opening your course will be the first time students are interacting with you, even if the interaction is asynchronous. There are a few strategies for reaching out before a course is open, but if you're interested in those, you really want to follow up with us directly. But one of the big departures for the asynchronous courses versus a synchronous course is that we open our courses a week early for what's called preview week. Now, preview week does not mean that the entire course needs to be up, running, and open, but you at least want to have your syllabus out there. At least, even if it says this syllabus may be subject to updating. What we really want to avoid is leaving our students without information about their status of their courses. So if for some reason you cannot open your course preview week, you really want to use something like the banner system to send an email to your students, letting them know when to expect that course to be open. Something else to consider is posting your first announcement. Now, the announcements automatically send emails to students, but that only works if the course is open. So this is really, think about this as the first thing students will see when they enter your course, because when they come in, they might see some pictures in the visual table of contents, depending on what you have visible, but they aren't really going to see anything from you until they get into the content area. And this gives you a way to jump ahead of that and simply give them a greeting beforehand. The student experience, again, we don't have time to cover that, but I wanted to say specifically there will be a link in the companion course to a workshop that we did this. And I think the biggest thing to look at is what it looks like for students to submit work and get their feedback on that work. Second day and onwards. Obviously, at this point, you'll start grading work. I think the key thing to think about with that is setting expectations. Basically, how quickly are students going to get their graded work back? And we'll touch on that slightly more in just a minute. Well, maybe not, because we're running short on time. But that's why that's wrong. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. So you want to give an idea to students of when they can expect their graded work back, but I would encourage you to build in a little bit of lead time there. Even if you expect to have a student's work graded in 5 days, it's perfectly fine to say it will be graded within 7 days. On the flip side, this is also why auto-graded work is nice, because students don't have to wait. So it's another reason I would consider putting at least some mastery quizzes in your course. And then just thinking about keeping up your instructor presence going onwards, you can do future announcements. It's very easy to make one announcement a week about something as basic as this is what's due this week, or here's a current event that you might be interested in. On the flip side, emails are still king when it comes to contacting students on a one-on-one level. But just like us, students are overwhelmed by information, so a relevant and noticeable title are really key here. With emails, you really have your own, it's up to you how you want to position yourself. Each instructor will have their own style. The two common ones are using a more laid-back style that makes you more approachable, or going with a more formal style that helps prepare students for the types of communication that will be expected of them in the professional world. But go with whatever works for you, best for you. Just try to be approachable. Automates, I just want you to remember that word. It's something that can be useful, but it's a complicated topic. Again, more information in the companion course. And last, I just wanted to talk quickly about participating and/or summarizing discussions. I don't view participating in a course the same as giving public feedback. I think you really want to be careful about participating in the course, because to me, that means more guiding the direction of the discussion. And it's very easy to sort of become the voice of God, where everybody thinks, oh, you're the instructor, you're right, versus having a discussion with you as the instructor. So I think true participation works better at high-level courses. There's also the idea of sort of summarizing discussions at the end of a module. It shows that you read the discussions, and you can even highlight a couple of discussions that were really good. Students like public praise. Going forward, just think about what our assessment of students is actually telling us. The overall grade at the end of the semester, or even at the end of a high-stakes assessment, only gives us a limited amount of information. So what do we want to know? Well, we really want to use assessment to determine how many of our students achieved which of the learning outcomes and what level of mastery. So with that, don't be afraid to dive into the statistics on exams, look at which questions were answered correctly, which were answered incorrectly. And even as you're going through something like a discussion or a paper, make notes to yourself about what contents the students really seem to have a good grasp of, or what concepts seem to have a poor grasp. And think about from there, if you pair all those comments together, you can get an idea of how your students as a group are doing, and you can take that information and improve your course. You can also solicit feedback. There is nothing that says that you have to wait to the end of the course to have a survey. You can put in your own surveys. In every single one of our sessions, I've added a survey to the companion course. The only downside is for anonymous surveys, there is no way to require them. So you get what you get. And then as you think about how your course is going, you can consider, what can I change now? In which case, make the change now. And what should I change maybe for the next iteration? In which case, just keep a notepad. Digital notepads are fine. And consider, hey, you know, I'd really like to make this change for next time. But don't let those ideas escape you. So going forward, again, we are always available at help@oswego.edu. There are multiple forums for requesting different types of assistance on the CTS webpage. The companion course has a lot of additional readings and resources. And again, we will be upgrading that. I will note that at some point, this iteration of the course will probably come to an end. But at that point, we'll replace it with something new, and we'll let you know about that, and you'll be able to be enrolled in whatever comes next if you want. And finally, we're always happy to have a talk with you. Even if you don't have a specific question, if you just want to talk about hey, what can I do that would be fun in my course? We love having those conversations. So that wraps it up. Are there any questions? I'm just going to take a deep breath.
I actually do have a question, Doug. I have a quick one. Can you show us how, like sometimes when I go into the administrator thing, there's some thing called the bulk managed dates or something like that. What is that and how does it work? If I'm not making sense, I can go, yeah, okay.
So which option is it that you're looking at, Steve?
I thought there was something called bulk managed dates or something.
No, it's just manage dates.
Maybe it's, yeah, okay.
So, but this is a bulk manager for dates. So this lets you see everything in the course. And in this option, there's a bulk edit dates.
Right, that's what so what does that do? Because like looking at your thing, there are no dates. Now, in my course, I know that there are start dates and due dates, but when I go into that, I don't see any of those dates listed there.
So bulk edit dates just changes all dates to whatever you set here. So it makes whatever you use in bulk edit dates, it changes all of the dates to whatever that's set for. So if I set it to 1/24/25, it would set everything to 1/24/25.
So then I'll probably never want to use it.
Bulk offset dates, which just takes all of the dates and moves them forwards or backwards a set number of days.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. Yeah, thank you for the presentation for this far. It's been, quite insightful. Now, you provided this course development training. If one uses it to develop a course, at a practice level, is it possible to export it, when one is ready to launch the course?
I got a lot of feedback from the speakers here, but if I understand what you were asking, if you build a course in the development shell that I gave you, you can then import that to any production course.
Okay, thank you.
And again, the instructions for doing that course copying will be in the companion course.
Oh, thanks.
Not a problem. Anything else? Okay, well, I know that these 4 sessions were a kind of insane information dump, so I thank you all for sticking with me. Hopefully it was useful to you. Hopefully the companion site will be useful to you in the future. And as always, the instructional designers are standing by at help@oswego.edu. And with that, have a wonderful afternoon.